I smiled at Vanessa across the hotel ballroom. She looked away. Good. That's exactly what I wanted her to do. Because 3 days ago at this same venue, she'd looked me up and down like I was something she'd scraped off her Louboutins. And now? Now she couldn't even meet my eyes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the night that changed everything. It was our company's 25th anniversary gala. Well, my husband Michael's company, Martinez and Associates, one of the top financial advisory firms in Chicago. Michael had been working there for 9 years, climbing steadily toward that elusive partner position. This gala was a big deal. Black tie, open bar, the kind of event where careers were made or broken over cocktails and small talk. I'd been looking forward to it, honestly. As a hospital administrator, my work events tend to be a lot more clinical. Budget meetings, compliance trainings, staff appreciation lunches in the cafeteria. So, the chance to put on a nice dress, do my hair, feel elegant for a night. I'd take it. I wore a navy cocktail dress I'd bought the year before for a different event. It still fit perfectly, the color brought out my eyes, and I'd gotten it on sale at Nordstrom Rack, which meant I'd paid a fraction of retail. I'm practical like that. When you're managing a household budget and saving for your 5-year-old's college fund, you don't drop $500 on a dress you'll wear once. Michael looked handsome in his tux. We took a selfie in the hotel lobby before heading into the ballroom, and I remember thinking how lucky I was. 8 years of marriage, 1 beautiful daughter, 2 solid careers. We had our struggles like any couple, but we were solid. Or so I thought. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, round tables with white linens and gold accents, a live jazz band playing in the corner. I recognized a few of Michael's colleagues and their spouses. We made our way to our assigned table. And that's when I saw her. Vanessa Chen. I'd met her exactly twice before. Once at last year's holiday party, briefly. And once when I'd stopped by Michael's office to drop off his forgotten laptop. Both times, she'd been perfectly polite. Friendly, even. She was Michael's assistant, 28 years old, sharp as a tack according to my husband. He'd mentioned more than once how lucky he was to have someone so competent helping him manage his client portfolio. Tonight, though, Vanessa looked different. Not just her appearance, though she was certainly dressed to the nines in a black silk gown that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. It was her demeanor. Confident. Almost predatory. She was holding court at the bar, surrounded by 3 junior associates who were hanging on her every word. And then she saw me. Her eyes did this slow scan, starting at my shoes and traveling up to my face. You know that look, right? The one that's not even trying to be subtle about its judgment. I felt it in my stomach, that little twist of discomfort. But I smiled anyway and waved. She whispered something to the associate next to her, and they both laughed. Michael was at the bar getting us drinks, so I was standing alone when Vanessa glided over. I say glided because that's exactly what it was. She moved like she owned the room. "Sarah," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "So good to see you. You too, Vanessa. You look beautiful. Thank you." She touched the diamond pendant at her throat, a casual gesture that managed to draw attention to the expensive piece. Michael has excellent taste. He helped me pick this out, actually. Said it was perfect for tonight's event. My smile froze slightly. Michael had helped her pick out jewelry? Oh, Vanessa continued, as if she just noticed my dress. You look lovely too. Is that the same dress from last year's gala? She tilted her head. I remember thinking how elegant it was. Classic pieces never go out of style, do they? There it was. The dig. Delivered with such sweetness that someone overhearing might think it was a compliment. But I heard what she was really saying. You're wearing last year's dress because you can't afford a new one. Before I could respond, she leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, hospital administration must be incredibly rewarding work. I mean, the satisfaction of helping people must make up for the salary difference, right? She laughed lightly. Thank goodness Michael makes sure I have everything I need for these events. Company card and all. I felt my face flush. Not from embarrassment but from anger. Who did this woman think she was? But I didn't snap. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I did what I've trained myself to do in my job when dealing with difficult board members or entitled doctors. I took a breath, I smiled, and I made a mental note. That's nice of him, I said evenly. Michael's always been generous with people he works closely with. Vanessa's smile widened. like she'd won something. He really is the best. I don't know what I'd do without him. Especially with the Morgan account. We've been working so closely on that one, late nights, weekends. It's been intense. The Morgan account. I'd heard Michael mention it. It was a big client, millions in managed assets. Landing it had been a major coup for the firm. I'm sure your hard work will pay off, I said. Oh, it already has. She touched that necklace again. Then she glanced over my shoulder. Anyway, I should mingle. So lovely chatting with you, Sarah. And she was gone, leaving me standing there with a plastic smile and a churning stomach. Michael returned with our drinks. Everything okay? He asked, handing me a glass of white wine. Fine, I lied. Vanessa says hello. Oh good, I'm glad you two got to chat. She's been working so hard lately. Really stepped up on the Morgan account. I sipped my wine and said nothing. But my mind was already working. Over dinner, I watched Vanessa. She was at a table near the front, laughing with senior partners, completely at ease. At one point, one of the managing partners, Richard Castellano, put his hand on her shoulder and said something that made her throw her head back in delight. She was charming everyone. But something was off. Call it instinct, call it 8 years of reading my husband's moods and behaviors, call it whatever you want. Something wasn't adding up. The jewelry, for one thing. That necklace wasn't costume. I'd seen enough real diamonds in my time to recognize them, and those were real. Michael had helped her pick it out? On a company card. And the dress. Vanessa's salary as an assistant couldn't possibly support that kind of wardrobe. I know what Michael makes. And even as a senior advisor, he doesn't throw around money like that. Then there was the way she'd emphasized working closely and late nights. It felt pointed, like she wanted me to think something. My first thought was the obvious one. Was my husband having an affair? I looked at Michael, deep in conversation with another advisor about market projections. He looked tired. He'd been coming home late a lot lately, true. But when I'd asked about it, he'd always had a reasonable explanation. Client meetings, proposal deadlines, the usual work stress. He didn't have the typical signs, no secret phone calls, no unexplained absences, no guilty behavior. But then again, I'd worked in healthcare long enough to know that people are excellent liars when they want to be. I excused myself to use the restroom. On the way, I passed Vanessa's table and overheard her talking to another assistant. Morgan specifically requested the aggressive growth portfolio. I processed all the paperwork myself. Richard signed off on everything, said it was exactly what we needed to close the deal. The other assistant said something I couldn't hear. Oh, Mr. Morgan was very clear about his preferences. Very specific instructions. Mr. Morgan. She kept saying Mr. Morgan. I locked myself in a bathroom stall and pulled out my phone. Normally, I wouldn't do this. I respect privacy. I trust my husband. But something in my gut was screaming at me to pay attention. I opened Google and typed, Morgan Chicago finance client. Nothing useful. Too generic. I tried, Morgan account Martinez Associates. Still nothing. Then I remembered something. Last month, Michael had been stressed about a compliance review. Something about client documentation. He'd muttered about Vanessa handling most of it. Said she was taking care of everything. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, though, I called my best friend Rachel. She works in financial compliance at a different firm. Hey, quick question, I said when she picked up. If someone at a financial advisory firm wanted to check whether an employee had any ethics violations at a previous job, how would they do that? FINRA, Rachel said immediately. Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. They keep records of all registered representatives. Why? Just curious. Would that be public information? Some of it, yeah. You can look up disciplinary actions, customer complaints, employment history. It's all on BrokerCheck. Sarah, what's going on? Probably nothing. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up before she could ask more questions. Back at the table, I smiled through the rest of dinner. I made small talk with the other spouses. I applauded when Richard Castellano gave a speech about the firm's success. I even danced with Michael when the band played our wedding song. But in my head, I was miles away, running through possibilities. The next morning, while Michael was in the shower and my daughter Emma was watching cartoons, I opened my laptop. BrokerCheck. It took me less than 2 minutes to find it. I typed in Vanessa Chen's name. The results loaded, and I felt my heart start to pound. Previous employment, Sterling Financial Group, New York. Termination reason, permitted to resign following internal investigation. I clicked for more details. The complaint history showed one disclosed event, allegation of unauthorized trading activity. Settled internally. No client funds lost. Unauthorized trading activity. She'd been fired from her previous job for ethics violations, and somehow, she'd landed a position at Michael's firm without anyone knowing. Or had they known? I spent the next hour digging deeper. I found Sterling Financial's press releases from 2 years ago. Buried in a quarterly report was a mention of compliance improvements following internal audit findings. No names. But the timing matched. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I logged into Michael's work email. I know his password. He's used the same one for everything since college, Emma plus his birth year. I'd asked him once to change it, to use something more secure, but he'd waved me off. Now I was grateful for his laziness. I searched for Vanessa in his inbox. Hundreds of emails. Most were routine work stuff. But then I found a thread from 3 months ago. Subject: Morgan account discrepancy. The email chain started with someone from compliance, asking about signature authorization on several Morgan account transactions. Michael had responded. Vanessa handled that directly with the client. I can have her send over the documentation. Vanessa's response: all signed originals are in the client file. Mr. Morgan prefers to handle his authorizations in person. Very old school. Compliance had replied, noted. Please ensure all future transactions over $500K have dual signature verification. Michael's response: will do. But here's what caught my eye. The email metadata showed that Vanessa's response had been sent from Michael's computer, not her own. His. Why would she be using his computer to send emails? I kept digging. Another email, this one from 6 weeks ago, buried in a folder labeled Archive 2024. It was from Michael to Richard Castellano. Richard, regarding your question about Vanessa's background check. I personally called her previous supervisor at Sterling. He gave her a glowing recommendation. Any issues she had there were minor and fully resolved. I'm confident she's an excellent addition to the team. Richard's response: good enough for me. Thanks for doing the legwork on that. My hands were shaking. Michael had known. He'd known about Sterling Financial, and he'd vouched for her anyway. He'd called her previous supervisor, who'd apparently lied about the circumstances of her departure, and then Michael had told Richard everything was fine. But why? I closed the laptop and sat back. Emma came over and climbed into my lap. Mommy, are you sad? She asked, touching my face. No, baby, I lied. Mommy's just thinking. About what? About work stuff. Nothing important. But it was important. Because if Michael had covered up Vanessa's background, if he'd vouched for her despite knowing about her ethics violations, then he'd put his entire career at risk. Partners at financial firms don't survive that kind of liability. If it ever came out that he'd knowingly hired someone with a disciplinary history and then lied about it, he'd be fired. Possibly even lose his securities license. So why would he do that? The affair theory suddenly seemed less likely. Michael wasn't stupid. If he was sleeping with Vanessa, he wouldn't tie his career to hers so completely. It would be too risky. Which meant there was something else going on. I spent the rest of the weekend acting normal. I made pancakes on Sunday morning. I took Emma to the park. I watched a movie with Michael that night, curled up on the couch like we always do. But inside I was planning. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. Then I drove to downtown Chicago, to a coffee shop 3 blocks from Michael's office. I sat by the window with a baseball cap on and sunglasses, feeling ridiculous and paranoid. At 11:47 a.m., Vanessa emerged from the building. She was on her phone, laughing at something. She walked 2 blocks north to a restaurant called Toscana's. I followed at a distance. She met a man. Mid-40s, expensive suit, salt and pepper hair. They sat at a corner table, and even from outside, I could see they were comfortable with each other. Familiar. I took out my phone and snapped a photo through the window. Then I went home and ran a reverse image search, cropping the photo to just show the man's face. It took me to a LinkedIn profile, James Morgan. Managing partner, Morgan Capital Holdings. Mr. Morgan. The client Vanessa kept mentioning. The one with the millions in managed assets. I felt cold. Over the next 2 days, I pieced it together. James Morgan did exist. Morgan Capital Holdings was real. But when I looked up the company's registered address, it led to a virtual office space. The kind you rent for $99 a month to have a professional mailing address. I called the number listed on their website. It went to voicemail. Generic message, no details. I searched for James Morgan's name in financial news. Nothing. No interviews, no press releases, no conference appearances. For someone managing millions of dollars, he had a suspiciously low profile. Then I found it. A small article in the Chicago Tribune's business section from 8 months ago. Local financial advisor faces scrutiny over questionable client accounts. The article didn't name Michael's firm, but it mentioned an anonymous tip to FINRA about potential phantom clients being used to inflate assets under management. The investigation had been dropped due to lack of evidence. And suddenly, it all made sense. Vanessa hadn't been fired from Sterling Financial for unauthorized trading. She'd been fired for creating fake client accounts. And now she was doing the same thing at Michael's firm. With Michael's knowledge, the Morgan account wasn't real. James Morgan wasn't a real client. Vanessa had fabricated the entire thing, probably with falsified documents and forged signatures. And my husband had not only known about it, he'd helped her cover her tracks. Why? Why would Michael risk everything? I thought about Richard Castellano putting his hand on Vanessa's shoulder at the gala, the way she'd charmed all the senior partners, the way Michael had vouched for her so strongly. She had leverage over him. She had to. But what? I needed to know before I did anything. Because once I pulled this thread, everything would unravel. Michael's career. Our financial security. Emma's future. I had to be absolutely certain. So I did something that probably crossed a line. I tracked Michael's location using the Find My Phone app we'd set up years ago for safety reasons. That Thursday night, when he said he was working late, he wasn't at the office. He was at an address in Lincoln Park. A residential building. I drove there, parked across the street, and waited. At 9:15 p.m., Michael came out. He looked stressed, running his hand through his hair the way he does when he's anxious. He got in his car and drove home. I waited another 5 minutes, then I got out of my car and walked to the building's entrance. The directory listed the residence. Apartment 4C, V. Chen. Vanessa's apartment. My husband had been at his assistant's apartment until 9:15 on a Thursday night. I drove home in a fog. When I walked in, Michael was on the couch with Emma, reading her a bedtime story. "Hey," he said, looking up. "You're home late. Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just had to run some errands." "Mommy." Emma held up her book. "Daddy's doing the funny voices." "That's great, baby." I kissed the top of her head. "You need to brush your teeth and get ready for bed." After Emma was asleep, I sat down next to Michael. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice calm. "Michael," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He looked wary. "Okay. Where did Vanessa work before your firm?" He blinked. Sterling Financial in New York." "Why? And did you check her references?" "Yes. I called her supervisor. He said she was great." "Did he mention why she left?" Michael hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "She wanted a change of scenery," he said. "New York wasn't a good fit." "Michael." I turned to face him fully. "I need you to tell me the truth. Did you know about her disciplinary history?" His face went white. "Sarah. Yes or no?" "Did you know?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." I felt my stomach drop, even though I'd known. Hearing him admit it was different. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you vouch for someone you knew had ethics violations?" "It's complicated." "Uncomplicate it." He stood up, started pacing. She had information. About me." "What information?" "A year and a half ago. I made a mistake. A client asked me to move some assets around in a way that wasn't technically. It wasn't illegal, but it was in a gray area. Compliance would have flagged it. It would have looked bad." "What did you do?" "I did what he asked." And I may have. I may have altered some dates on the documentation to make it look like the transactions happened in a different quarter. For tax purposes. I stared at him. You falsified documents. It was one time, Sarah. One client, one transaction. And technically, the client got what he wanted, nothing bad happened. That's fraud, Michael. I know. He sat back down, put his head in his hands. I know. And Vanessa found out. She was organizing old files and saw the discrepancy. She figured it out. And she blackmailed you. She said she'd keep quiet if I helped her get a job at the firm. She'd been fired from Sterling for something similar, and she needed a fresh start. She said if I vouched for her, she'd never mention what she found. So you've been covering for her for a year and a half. Yes. And the Morgan account? Is that real? His silence was answer enough. I stood up. Michael, do you understand what you've done? You've committed fraud. Multiple times. You've helped Vanessa commit fraud. You've put the entire firm at risk. I didn't have a choice. You absolutely had a choice. I kept my voice low because Emma was sleeping, but I was furious. You could have come clean when she found out. You could have gone to the partners, explained what happened, accepted the consequences. Instead, you've been digging yourself deeper and deeper. I couldn't lose my job, Sarah. We have a mortgage, Emma's school, our savings, and now you're going to lose everything anyway. Do you think this ends well? Do you think Vanessa is just going to keep quiet forever? He looked broken. I don't know what to do. I stood there, looking at my husband, the man I'd loved for 8 years, the father of my child, and I realized something. He'd made terrible choices. Illegal choices, but he'd made them out of fear, not malice. And Vanessa? She'd seen someone vulnerable and exploited him. She'd inserted herself into his career, his life, and now she was parading around in expensive jewelry, mocking me at company galas, acting like she owned him. I thought about her face when she'd looked at my dress, the smug satisfaction, the casual cruelty. I thought about what she'd said. Michael, make sure I have everything I need. And I made a decision. Michael, I said quietly, where did Vanessa work before Sterling Financial? What? Her first job. After college. Where did she work? He looked confused. I don't know. Why does that matter? Because, I said, if we're going to fix this, I need to know everything about her. Everything. Over the next week, I became an expert on Vanessa Chen. I found her college roommate on Facebook and sent her a message pretending to be planning a reunion. I learned Vanessa's first job was at a boutique financial firm in San Francisco that had gone out of business under mysterious circumstances. I tracked down a former colleague who, after a few glasses of wine over video chat, told me Vanessa had been let go quietly after questions about client account activity. This was her pattern. She found vulnerable financial advisors, gained their trust, exploited their weaknesses and used them to create fake accounts and skim money. Michael was just her latest mark. Armed with this information, I made a plan. Not a revenge plan. A solution. 3 days before Michael's firm's quarterly compliance review, I did something I never thought I'd do. I sent an anonymous email to Richard Castellano's personal email address, the one listed on his LinkedIn profile. The subject line was, "Important information regarding employee background verification." The body of the email was simple. You may want to run a comprehensive FINRA broker check on all employees hired in the past 2 years. Specifically, check employment termination reasons and cross-reference with internal compliance reports. Some discrepancies may require immediate attention. I didn't sign it. I used a burner email account created on a library computer. 2 days later, Michael came home early. His face was ashen. "They're doing a full audit," he said. HR called everyone hired in the past 2 years into individual meetings. They're running background checks again. Why? I asked, knowing exactly why. Someone sent the partners an anonymous tip. They think there might be compliance issues. I didn't say anything. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. I heard him pacing downstairs at 2 a.m. I went down and found him on the couch, staring at his phone. "Vanessa's not answering," he said. "She left the office early, and now she's not picking up. Maybe she's asleep. She never turns off her phone." He looked at me. "Sarah, if they find out about the Morgan account, if they find out I vouched for her knowing her history, I'll lose my license. I could go to jail." I sat down next to him. This was the moment. The moment where I had to decide, protect my husband or let him face the consequences of his choices. Michael, I said slowly. What if you went to Richard first? Before they find out on their own? What? What if you told him everything? The document you altered, Vanessa's blackmail, the Morgan account. What if you came clean and offered to cooperate fully with the investigation? They'd fire me. Maybe. But maybe they'd appreciate your honesty. Maybe you'd get a lesser consequence than if they have to discover it themselves. I can't. Sarah. I can't just throw away my career. You already did that when you falsified those documents. I took his hand. But you can still control how this ends. You can be the person who did the right thing, even if it was late. He was quiet for a long time. What about Emma? He finally asked. What about our life? We'll figure it out. I make decent money. We have savings. We'll downsize if we have to. But Michael, you can't keep living like this. Waiting for everything to collapse. It's killing you. I could see him breaking. The walls he'd built up over 18 months of deception were crumbling. She knew exactly what to say, he whispered. When she found those documents, she said she understood. That she'd made mistakes too. That we could help each other. I believed her. I know. I should have told you. Right away. I should have trusted you to help me figure it out. Yes, I said. You should have. The next morning, Michael called Richard Castellano and requested an emergency meeting. I didn't go with him. This was his mess to clean up. But before he left, I stopped him at the door. Michael. No matter what happens, we're going to be okay. You, me, and Emma. We're going to figure this out. He kissed me. I love you. I know. He was gone for 4 hours. When he came back, he looked exhausted but lighter somehow. Like he'd been carrying a weight and finally set it down. I told them everything, he said. Richard, the other partners, the in-house counsel, everything. And? Vanessa's been terminated, effective immediately. They're filing reports with FINRA and the SEC. She'll probably never work in finance again. What about you? I'm suspended pending full investigation. They'll decide in 2 weeks whether to terminate my employment or allow me to resign. Either way, I'll probably face fines. Maybe probation with FINRA. But Richard said. He paused. He said he appreciated my honesty. That coming forward voluntarily would count for something. I nodded. Okay. Sarah, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For lying, for putting our family at risk, for being too proud and scared to ask for help. I know you are. Can you forgive me? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Eventually, I said, but right now, I need you to commit to something. Anything. Therapy. Individual and couples. Because we have a lot to work through, and I'm not doing it without professional help. Done. And complete transparency. Bank accounts, emails, phone, everything. No more secrets. Absolutely. And Michael? I looked him in the eye. If you ever lie to me again about anything, I'm done. 1 strike. That's all you get. I understand. The next 2 weeks were hard. Michael was anxious, barely sleeping, constantly checking his email. The firm's investigation was thorough. They discovered that Vanessa had created not just the Morgan account but 2 other phantom clients, funneling fees into accounts she controlled. The total fraud was nearly $300,000. Michael's role was deemed failure to exercise due diligence and misrepresentation during hiring process rather than active participation in fraud. The distinction mattered. He was allowed to resign rather than being terminated. He had to pay a $50,000 fine and accept a 1-year suspension of his securities licenses. It meant he couldn't work as a financial advisor for a year. Our income dropped by 2/3 overnight. We sold Michael's car and became a 1-car family. We canceled Emma's piano lessons and our family gym membership. We started eating at home every night instead of our usual Friday takeout. We paused our retirement contributions. But we were okay. Michael got a job as a financial literacy teacher at a community college, which he could do without a securities license. The pay was terrible, but he actually loved it. He came home energized, talking about his students, about making a difference. I picked up extra administrative consulting work on weekends. Emma didn't really notice the changes. She was still 5, still happy, still loved. And Michael and I. We went to therapy every week. We talked about trust and consequences and the choices we make when we're scared. It wasn't easy. Some sessions, I left angry. Some sessions, he left defensive. But we kept going. 6 months after everything fell apart, I ran into someone at the grocery store. It was Richard Castellano. "Sarah," he said, looking uncomfortable. "How are you?" "We're managing." "How are things at the firm?" "Good. Busy. We've implemented new compliance protocols. Much more rigorous background checks now." He paused. "Listen, I wanted you to know. What Michael did. Coming forward like that, it took real integrity. A lot of people wouldn't have. He should have done it sooner." "Yes. But he did do it. And that matters. Tell him when his suspension is up. If he wants to come back to financial services, he should call me. I might know some firms who value people who've learned from their mistakes." I was surprised. "Thank you. And Sarah? Between you and me, I think you're the reason he found the courage to come clean. He's lucky to have you." After he walked away, I stood there in the cereal aisle, holding a box of Cheerios, and I thought about that night at the gala. About Vanessa in her expensive dress, dripping with smugness. About how she'd looked at me like I was less than her. She thought she'd won. She thought she had power over my husband, over my life. But real power isn't in the expensive things you can buy or the secrets you can hold over someone's head. Real power is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It's knowing how to gather information and use it wisely. It's knowing the difference between revenge and justice. Vanessa wanted to humiliate me with her comments about my dress and my salary. So I asked myself one simple question. Where did you work before this firm? And that one question, pursued to its logical end, brought down her entire scheme. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to make a scene at that gala. I didn't need to confront her or embarrass her publicly. I just needed to be patient, be smart, and ask the right questions. As I pushed my cart toward the checkout, I thought about what I'd tell Emma someday when she was old enough to understand all of this. I'd tell her that her dad made mistakes, serious ones, but he owned up to them. I'd tell her that I chose to fight for our family. Not because everything was perfect, but because some things are worth saving. And I'd tell her what I learned, that strength isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, sometimes it's about being the calmest, the most observant, the most strategic. Vanessa thought my old dress meant I was powerless. She had no idea that while she was busy showing off her jewelry and her expensive clothes, I was watching. Learning. Planning. She mistook my quietness for weakness. That was her biggest mistake, because I wasn't weak. I was just waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, I didn't need to raise my voice. One question was enough.